I'm ready to make my Dulce de Leche pastry cream. So the method for this is very similar to if we were making a plain pastry cream. We just have a couple of small method tweaks. So the first thing I'm going to do is caramelize my sugar. So I have my granulated sugar, and then I'm going to add just enough water so this becomes like a wet sand consistency. So the water is just here to help prevent the sugar from crystallizing. When I cook sugar to the caramel stage, it is 100% sugar and no water. So I know that by the time I get to the caramel stage, all of this water that I added will have cooked away. The original method for pastry cream has sugar and milk that are brought to a boil. My eggs are tempered. Then I bring the entire mixture back to a boil, and then I strain it and add in my butter and my vanilla. So for this recipe, since we are making it dulce de leche, I have my can of sweetened condensed milk that I've already turned into dulce de leche, and I just want to amp up the flavor a little bit by caramelizing this first sugar in the recipe, and that is gonna just give me that little extra punch of flavor. Whenever I have sugar that's at the caramel stage and we're adding any sort of dairy to it, or maybe even water, you want to make sure that that liquid is hot. So I have my milk on the side in a small pot, and I brought that to a simmer, and then I'm just keeping that warm so that when I add it to my sugar that's at caramel stage, it won't seize up the caramel and basically turn it into shards of hard caramel. At this initial stage, you can stir occasionally just to make sure that the sugar is melting evenly. Once I start to see some bubbles and some simmering, I'm not going to worry about stirring anymore, and I actually don't want to stir any further because otherwise I could introduce crystals and promote crystallization, which I don't want to do. What happens when you get crystallization is we'll actually get a ring of hard sugar right around the surface edge here, and that sugar that is never going to end up in our finished recipe. It would be stuck here on the pot. So I want to do everything I can to help cut down the risk of that. So I'm starting to get some bubbles in here. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to wash down the sides of my pot. So I have water and a pastry brush. So just from my stirring, I have a little bit of sugar granules that are up on the sides of the pot. These, if left alone, will act like little magnets, and they will continue to grow, and I will get that ring of sugar that cooks right to the edge of the pot. So I want to make sure and get rid of all of that. I'm starting to just see some color around the edges of my pan, so I'm going to give this a gentle swirl just to distribute that heat evenly. I still don't want to stir at this point because by agitating too much I could cause crystallization. What I'm looking for is a nice sort of amber caramel, the color of honey. This is still a little bit pale right now, so I'm just watching very closely so that I can know exactly when to pull it off and to add in my cream. Once I add the cream, I won't get any more caramelization of the sugar, so this is my chance to really get that nice caramel flavor. Okay, this looks great. So now I am going to add my caramel gradually. You can see how much it puffs up, so that is a big reason of why I have such a large pot. Whenever we have dairy that's hitting sugar, it's sort of a violent reaction of when those two come together. So I want to make sure that I'm doing this nice and gradually so that I don't get it spilling over the sides and boiling over. Making sure that's combined nicely. Okay. So now what I have is this caramel milk. Okay. So I am going to go ahead and bring this back to a boil. It shouldn't take very long because I had my caramel at such a hot temperature, and also my milk was already hot. Gotta scrape with my spatula too, make sure I have all that goodness scraped in. And if you have some small pieces of caramel that are a little lumpy, I'm not worried about that at all, because I know when I finish off this pastry cream, I'm going to strain it so the strainer will catch any of those small little bits. Just scraping the bottom with my spatula, make sure there's no caramel hanging around there. And while I'm waiting on this to come back up, I have already whisked together. This is my whole eggs, my second sugar, and my cornstarch. Remember that the sugar and the cornstarch, it is best to combine those together first, and then add that combination to your eggs. So I'm going to temper this mixture, so just gradually adding that caramel milk in, so that I am gradually bringing the heat of these eggs up and I don't get any scrambling of my eggs. This recipe is a little bit different from the pastry cream we made a few weeks ago when we were using that as a filling for our eclairs. This one has a higher content of cornstarch, and it also uses whole eggs instead of egg yolks. What that does is it gives us a much firmer set of our pastry cream, which is what we want when we are using this as a tart filling. Because we know that we'll be slicing that tart eventually, you want to make sure that it is firm enough that it will not run out of the sides when you slice it, and will still keep nice, sharp, clean cuts. Okay, so now I'm going to bring this back to a boil. I'm gonna, once I see those first few bubbles, then I'm going to boil this for about 1 minute afterwards, and I'm going to do the taste check to make sure that my cornstarch has been completely, the flavor is completely cooked out, so I just taste this beautiful caramel flavor and not the raw starch. dulce de leche is fully incorporated into my pastry cream. I'm going to go ahead and, even while this is still warm, I'm going to go ahead and pour this into my prepared shell. My shell has been cooling for a bit, so the only heat that I'll have is what is coming from my custard. By adding the custard when it's still warm, I'm able to smooth this into a really nice even surface and not have to worry about pastry cream that has started to set up, especially since this recipe is geared towards having a very firm set of the custard. So now this is going to chill for several hours so that it can firmly set up. Just like all pastry cream, this will get a skin on top. So before I put this in the refrigerator, I'm going to cover this with plastic wrap directly on the surface, and then I'll be back to decorate when this is fully chilled.